Hello, everybody, and welcome along to the MONIN and You post-COVID-19 reintroduction course, part 1. So today we're going to be talking about operations and product offering and how in the post-COVID-19 world, businesses can really thrive and kind of adapt to whatever the new normal will look like. So today we're going to be joined by 3 experts, 2 from the MONIN team and Sam, who's an external speaker who works at Grind. So if everyone would like to just quickly introduce themselves and just to explain what you do, that would be amazing. So Marcin.
Hello everybody, my name is Marcin. I recently joined the MONIN team as UK National Account Manager and International Accounts. My background is actually from the coffee industry, so for the last 10 years I worked for 2 quite significant size coffee roasters, to start with as a trainer, following by account management.
Thank you. And Henry?
Hi guys, my name's Henry. I'm part of the Beverage Innovation team at MONIN. I've been with MONIN for about 2 years. And before that, my background was managing and working in cocktail bars from the likes of Oxford to Sydney, Australia, and then to London, where I've been for the last 9 years. So yeah.
Thank you. And Sam?
Hey guys, I'm Sam. I am the head of beverage training and development at Grind. So I'm responsible for curating the coffee menu, the cocktail menu, and teaching the team how to make the drinks.
Wonderful. And my name's Dan Fellows. I'm the 2-time World Coffee and Good Spirits champion. And I basically love everything to do with coffee and cocktails and how we can bring the 2 together. And I also have a big interest in kind of management and how to run a business. So I'm going to be kind of asking the questions and throwing a few thoughts out there. Okay, so I'm going to start by giving a little bit of context as to where we are in the world as an industry, which I'm sure a lot of you will be familiar with. And then we're going to talk about what the world will look like once this kind of settles down and we can start to begin reopening and adapting to whatever the new normal will look like. So at the moment in the UK, the GDP in April fell by 20.4%, which obviously is huge. And it was particularly the hospitality industry, which is one of the biggest victims of the COVID-19 crisis. So I've been pulling some research together from a few different sources, and one from CGA, which interviewed business owners, suggested that 73% of the businesses interviewed had closed down entirely at some point throughout the lockdown, which obviously is huge. And this focused on the hospitality sector. So the impact on employment with huge amounts of staff members on furlough is just unprecedented. And I don't think the industry has ever seen anything like it. So in fact, 83% of the businesses interviewed had furloughed 90% or more of their staff. So this is just a huge amount of people not working, obviously on a government supported salary. And it doesn't look like it's going to change immediately. There is hope. Their announcement was that hopefully the sector will open no earlier than the 4th of July, but we're optimists. We're aiming for the 4th of July and fingers crossed these things come back. It won't look the same, but it'd be amazing to have all these people back into work, ourselves included. A lot of us have been kind of affected by this. And I think it's going to be a really nice thing to be able to go out, see your friends and have a drink. And I think it's a hugely important thing for people, the kind of social side of things, going out and getting a coffee, interacting with people, which is something we haven't really been able to do. And I think the sooner this can happen, the better it's going to be for everyone involved. So no earlier than the 4th of July, but let's cross our fingers that the 4th of July is when things will come back to normal. So next, the current UK guidelines, which I'm going to quickly run through for context, but we won't go into too much detail because everyone's fairly familiar with these. So the government have outlined that all businesses that do reopen must follow some pretty important steps. So in order to reopen, they need to carry out a risk assessment. So reviewing everything that the business previously did and how we can make it a COVID safe work environment, evaluating the kind of systems and procedures that are in place and how they can be adapted to make sure everyone is, staff and customers are as safe as possible. So in addition to this, obviously people are going to have to really review and develop their cleaning, hand washing and hygiene procedures, both back of house and front of house. A lot of people will be working from home, which in the hospitality industry is very difficult unless you're in a pretty high management position. Social distancing is going to be here for a long time by the sounds of things. The distance may or may not change, but wherever this isn't possible, businesses really need to manage the transmission risk and make sure there's separation or masks or whatever that might look like. So the title, A New Normal, is quite ambiguous. I think a lot of us are wondering what this is going to be. we're going to try and put a few pieces of the puzzle together today. And obviously this is a huge change for a lot of businesses. So when interviewing consumers, the safety measures taken to reduce the risk of COVID-19 was the biggest factor in determining whether customers will visit a particular venue. So product, service, even people is coming in secondary to the safety of themselves and their families. So this is something that's really important. And as business operators, there are going to be huge challenges and changes involved in this. So when those business leaders were interviewed by CGA, the operational changes due to COVID-19 and the additional regulations were the two biggest challenges that business leaders expected to face in the coming months. So these are really unprecedented times. Everything we knew as normal in the past, we have to really think about. Some things will stay the same, some things will drastically change. So a couple of examples. The wonderful Grind have opened up their Greenwich site currently, with the rest, I guess, to be slowly reopened. And the coffee is a takeaway only service. So this obviously reduces the transmission through porcelain. A lot of people are going to be having to sterilize cups, et cetera. And this is something that's going to be factored in the future. But for now, we're looking at takeaway only, and we need to work out how to do this in a sustainable and an enjoyable way, because we don't just go for fuel, we go for enjoyment. We want to have a nice experience when we have a coffee or a drink. It's going to be really important that anything hands-on, front of house, comes back behind the bar. So when we're taking orders, things like sugar caddies, takeaway lids, these just aren't going to be able to be free for anyone to touch. So we'll talk about it later, but anything that is front of house in terms of drink construction will have to move behind the bar. And we'll talk about how we can do this in the next few minutes. In places like supermarkets and now pretty much all retail sites, we have the perspex screens between the server and the customer. And this is going to be something I think we're just going to have to get used to. So next week, we're going to be talking about how we can maintain really positive customer service and rapport through a screen, which is challenging, but actually through the kind of rise of this kind of face-to-face digital media, we're getting used to this. So I think even just a face-to-face meeting through a perspex screen is better than something, at least we're face-to-face and we can see human beings. So we'll talk about that more next week, but this is something we're going to have to adapt to. And today we'll focus on what happens behind the screen in order to make things as safe as possible. Social distancing is something, like I say, is going to be here for the foreseeable future. Not only is this going to be affecting front of house, where we're going to have to separate tables and that kind of thing, but back of house, we need to be respectful of each other and our colleagues and our teammates and make sure we're not too close. So we'll talk more about how this can be applied behind the bar with limited space capacities later, but this is something which we're going to have to adapt front of house and back of house. And obviously we're getting this in supermarkets, retail, pretty much anywhere you go now, there are distancing markers in place. And obviously the queuing side of this is obviously really important as well. Behind the bar, we're going to have to improve our hygiene systems. So here's the example of the 20-minute hand wash, which we're all used to now. You've got to really kind of go to town on your hands, make sure they're super clean. And this is never more important than if you're making food or drinks for people. So we'll talk about this a little bit later. And this is, again, cross all the different industries and different places of work. This is something we really need to focus on now. And there is positivity. So the 3Gem research, which was actually done in May this year, did state that 67.2 people, so over 2/3, plan to revisit their favorite bar, pub or restaurant within the first month of reopening. So that's really important. So people do want to get out. We shouldn't be giving up hope. We should be positive. We should be optimistic. The remaining third will come later, but I think in that first month, it's really critical that we really reassure people and make sure they feel comfortable coming out for a nice drink, a coffee, some food, whatever it might be. How are people doing this? The products that people are offering are greatly changing. So previously we'd have these really long multi-page menus, loads of products, loads of prep, loads of kind of time back of house in order to make them possible. And because A, lots of staff are on furlough, B, we're limited on space and how many people can be in a small space, and C, we don't have time to be preparing long-winded menus where there aren't necessarily the customers to order the drinks or food. We're getting these kind of trimmed, refined menus, which are really, really important to run in a very lean and kind of productive, efficient business. So this is something we're going to focus on to begin with. And what I'd like to speak to you guys about is three things. So what items should be on these simplified menus? What factors we should consider when we're designing a menu, whether that's repeatability, efficiency, how it can be communicated, and then finally, how important nostalgia and comfort is when designing shorter menus. So from the research, we found that the overwhelming biggest factor in selecting a drink when people visit their favorite outlets is to choose something that they already love. So I imagine if this survey took place last year, it'd be very different. I think people would want something different, or maybe something that they might not have tried before. But actually now people really want something that they know, that they love, and that's going to bring back those feelings of nostalgia. So starting off with the first question, I think it would be good perhaps start with Sam, with your practical experience. What sort of items do you think should feature on these simplified menus?
Well, it's interesting reading this and reading the things that are important to people. It's not a million miles away from how I think, certainly myself and a lot of other people approach creating menus anyway. The core difference here is that you're being driven by the fact that because of the social distancing measures and because of the decrease in footfall, you just simply can't have a large bloated menu with lots of items on, leading to lots of waste. So I think for me, the core thing is things that you know are going to sell because they're popular anyway. And that ties in heavily with the something that I already love or something that's a little bit indulgent, those fan favorites. I think when we're talking coffee menus can be quite long, but often they're made of two ingredients, coffee and milk. So there's not too much cutting to be done. Particularly one of the things that we've done in the one site we have currently reopened, which has a takeaway beverage license, is that we've trimmed our sort of 40 drink cocktail menu down to 6. Wow. Which is obviously a big cut. And the things that are on there are things that we know are going to sell, things that people already love, like your espresso martinis, like your Aperol spritz, very summery, very seasonal. We've got a slushy machine in there because it adds a little bit of excitement, gives people something to focus on, and a couple of fan favorites like your Negronis or your mojitos. So I think it is really important that, as we see here, simplicity, repeatability, and accessibility, and which again is exemplified by the fact that we no longer have big teams to do any back of house prep. Staff need to be maintaining distance and cutting transmission. So any products that you have that help you get your prep down, simplify your steps, and simplify your resources are obviously fantastic.
Nice. So what are your top 6 cocktails, if you don't mind me asking?
The cocktails that are on the menu, we have the espresso martini, the Aperol spritz, a frosé slushy, a mojito, an old fashioned, and a Negroni.
Nice. Amazing.
But
so yeah.
The sellers are the espresso martini, the Aperol spritz, and the frosé. I mean, the frosé sells so well.
Yeah. Nice. I think it's pretty obvious simplicity is going to be key there, isn't it? So, Marcin, obviously you've got a lot of experience in training people. From a trainer's perspective, obviously we're not going to be having large groups of people. How do you think the future looks when it comes to teaching people how to make these drinks? What do you think the focus of training will be moving from and to? Obviously, before we were looking at really kind of technical side of things, so real exact approaches to making drinks and cocktails and food and coffee. But now, do you think it's going to move to more efficiency and how we can keep things simple and clean, rather than having such a broad spectrum of education? Do you think things will really streamline in the training side of things?
I think that temporarily, yeah, definitely. You need to serve your drink pretty quick because you don't want to gather a lot of people in that waiting area waiting for their beverage. Simplify menus, 100%. Instead of 2 or 3 or even 5 ingredients in the drinks, you want to reduce this to 2 or 3. You want to introduce probably cold brew instead of your iced coffee with based on espresso. I believe that you should introduce filter coffee to be widely available. Previously filter coffee was a queue master, and that's exactly how it could work. So you're just gonna go and grab your cup of beautiful filter, maybe with alternative milk. You have to give your customer an option. But I think, yeah, that's definitely efficiency and simplicity will be something what will be on each trainer's mind at this very moment.
I think another thing that's quite interesting, we'll stay with you, Marcin. So yesterday you went to have a coffee, but you also went to have an experience, but you probably didn't have the experience you hoped for. Do you think the experience-driven drinks, such as your kind of dry ice cocktails, your pour over filter bars, your even things like latte art, do you think these are now going to become secondary to speed, safety, efficiency? Or do you think there will be a place for the theatrical drink?
I made sure that I'll find a coffee shop where I can walk in and have an experience. And indeed, I did. It took me a while since I live in Kent. There are not many of them around, but I walked in to the coffee shop, which was labeled, obviously. So immediately I knew what to do, where to go, how to behave, where I can wash my hands, where I should place my order, where I will be directed after I place my order, and where I should wait for my drinks. I was actually positively surprised that the menu there wasn't really simpler than it was before. I felt that I could actually customize my drinks. So maybe because I don't know, maybe this is the beginning, maybe this is learning for them as well. Maybe they will discover what they need to do better in the very near future. Both my drinks were delicious and they were both looking very good. Although before COVID, you walk into the coffee shop to smell the coffee, be around the people, be happy, be together, and enjoy your drink in a nice atmosphere. At this very moment, I was a little bit attracted by a pile of chairs on the left and right hand sides, and an empty space in the middle of the coffee shop. What I found actually quite amusing was that two people were sitting outside the coffee shop in the sun, sipping their coffee from a takeaway cup, so they could still feel a little bit of this coffee shop vibe. So it was a different experience. It wasn't negative because I kind of knew what to expect, but it was different. Listen, I mean, we are coffee lovers nation, and I'm positive that we'll adapt and we will go through it, and there won't be any negativity. I'm sorry for any negative comments during my speech, but I'm positive that people will go back. We'll find the new normal as normal, but eventually we'll pass this.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that jump out there. I think from a personal point of view, if I go to a restaurant and they have hundreds of items on the menu, straight away that puts me off. So I think I'd much rather see a restaurant or even a cocktail bar who has maybe 10, 12 dishes or drinks done really, really well. I'd much rather see that than have hundreds of options pulled out of a freezer or, just not quality driven, but quantity driven. So I actually think if one thing I've been doing recently is every cocktail I've made for myself has basically been a twist on a classic. So I've been using different kind of flavors to twist, like a white chocolate old fashioned or whatever that might be. And obviously I've got a cupboard full of MONIN syrups at the moment, which has been amazing because I can twist any classic and pull a flavor in a quality driven way into the drink. And that's been really nice. So I think Henry, with things like menu design and keeping things simple, there is also an element of you can have a core template. So an iced coffee or whatever that might be, whether it's milk or alternative milk. And then you can just pull a load of different flavors in, your classic flavors, salted caramel, toffee nut, et cetera, et cetera. But I think there's definitely a place in there for familiar drinks, which have been twisted using kind of different flavor profiles as well. So when you're kind of designing cocktails, do you think that's a good way to do things? What's your experience been when you've designed menus in the past? Have you had a small kind of refined menu, or have you twisted classics? What's your preferred way to do things?
I think probably a hybrid of both, if I'm honest. I think twisted classics are always great. Obviously this was maybe going back to the time pre-COVID. People always want something that they can have a memory towards and they know, but they like to almost push their boundaries in a way that they, so I know, let's take the espresso martini that obviously Grind have still got on their menu. obviously because it's such a big seller. I mean, obviously that's, I mean, you've got the 3 key ingredients, but you can always twist that up with whether it be then the addition of honeycomb or salted caramel or white chocolate. And these flavors, I think, take that original really great selling drink almost to another level, and it keeps people on their toes and keeps them excited and will keep them coming back for more. And you can change that flavor seasonally. For me, that was always a go-to whenever I was designing drinks and concepts for accounts. It was always taking the core original products and just doing a little personal twist for them. So, yeah.
Sam, I'm surprised you don't have the Irish espresso martini on there.
It's a prep heavy drink with high wastage levels, which is one of the reasons we don't. As much as it was in our sort of top 10 sellers on the menu before, we did a little bit of looking at everything and breaking it down and seeing what we could make low prep, much smaller teams than we had before. And it was one of the drinks. I want to echo what Henry said. I think that even pre-COVID, people enjoy things that they can recognize, but also happy to experiment and explore a little. And joy of, as you said, taking flavored syrups and adding them to a mojito, an old fashioned, a Manhattan, a Negroni, things that people recognize, really gives them that something they already love, but with something a little bit new as well.
Yeah. I think I was going to say guilty of it, but it's not guilty. It's quite a nice way to drink. You have your kind of favorite drinks, you bring in something a little bit different and you try and improve them. I think that's quite a simple way to build both familiarity, but also kind of exploration as well. So I think actually, Sam, one of your drinks was all about kind of comfort as well, wasn't it? And for your competition recently. So you had, what were the 3 titles of the drinks?
Oh, yes. So we had Homecoming, which is the drink you're referring to, which was all about some things that were very personal and comforting to me: sherry, mushrooms, and coffee.
Yeah.
We had Escapism, which was a drink that was all about using ingredients in an unusual way, focusing quite heavily on zero waste. Yeah. And then we had Juxtaposition, which was about taking 2 contrasting ideas and trying to marry them together.
Yeah, I think that's actually a couple of really nice approaches to design and drinks and menus, because there's that big juxtaposition between familiarity and escapism, but actually we all go to bars to kind of disconnect from the world and just sit and enjoy ourselves. So I think that's quite a nice approach. Nostalgia obviously is key. We've kind of touched upon that. And like you can see here as well. So something affordable is important, but equally just below affordability is something that reminds me of happy times. So like, I think that makes us all kind of smile and go, simpler times for sure. So I think, when it comes to designer menus, we really need to factor all these things in. So it's clearly very important. Henry, you have a demo for us today. Drink you think would fit really well on a post-COVID menu. So Henry, if you'd like to take it away.
I do. And just to reiterate the points that have already been brought up, I mean, in a post-COVID world, I imagine there's going to be a big focus on simplicity, nostalgia, as we've touched on, but also speed of service. So the drink that I'm going to show today is basically, it's a craft soda. Really, really simple. Fundamentally, it's going to be just 2 ingredients, and then you can just dress this up as much as you want, okay? So what we're going to do, we're going to take a normal tumbler glass. This can also be made in a takeaway cup or on a larger scale in a Kilner jar, so up to 8 litres. You can then put that on display, so when your customers, for the short amount of time that they're coming into your businesses, they can see it and they want it. Fundamentally, drinks are sold with the eyes first. You see something, you want it. I mean, that's why Aperol Spritzers and espresso martinis always do so well, right? Simple as that. So this, as I say, is a handcrafted soda. We're going to go with something really summery, really delicious, and one of my favorites. We're going to go with passion fruit. It's just absolutely fantastic. It takes me back personally to a happier time when I could see people face to face in the flesh. And it sort of reminds me of holidays as well. And look, passion fruit for me, especially for the last 2-3 years, has been on almost every menu you ever come across, whether it be in bars, coffee shops, or restaurants. For the porn star martini, passion fruit lemonades, passion fruit iced teas, okay? And who knows, it might creep into some coffee cocktails one day. Sam, Dan, I'll leave that to you, but who knows? No pressure. So for this, really, really easy. And obviously this can be made with minimal touching, you can pre-batch this up as well. So we're going to be doing just 20 mils of passion fruit syrup. We're going to be doing soda water, hence handcrafted soda. You can do still as well, so you can still give the customer that choice of what they want, still or sparkling. Simple as that. Give a little stir. Top it up with ice. Straw optional, obviously trying to cut down on how much the produce you're touching, touch time as well. And then just to sort of jazz it up, dress it up, and make people really want to purchase and drink these in the sunshine. Just going to do a fresh little bit of garnish. Do a little mint sprig and just a passion fruit. I mean, that color contrast right there between the green, the pinks, and the yellows, super, super eye-catching, super quick, super easy. Perfect, right? Any excuse. And once again, I mean, let you touch on the next point. You can instantly put booze in. You've taken a 2-ingredient drink and made it a cocktail instantly, right?
Nice.
Obviously, with that, I mean, that can be the basis. If you wanted a little bit more, not taxing, but maybe a little bit more push the boat out, we can drop this to 15 mils, the passion fruit syrup. And then we could bring in a mango puree, almost make like a Solero flavor. So then you're creating a concept, and then people will remember that, and then their mind will go back to a time before last summer, and they were sat in the park eating a Solero ice cream surrounded by 5,000 people. Sounds pretty perfect, right? Instead of your own in your living room eating a Solero ice cream, it's not quite the same. So yeah, 15, super easy. We'll do this one with still water. Once again, give it a little stir. A really great flavor combination for me is mango and cucumber. So we're going to do a little cucumber slice and a little lime wedge. Once again, these can be put in using tongs, obviously to try and cut down how much you're touching the fruit. But fundamentally, same drink, one extra ingredient, a little bit different, right? And again, both great with booze, especially gin, any excuse when the sun's shining, right? Easy. I think these can be reproduced in both bars and coffee shops, so they're great for both sides of the industry. So, yeah, super.
Amazing. Thanks, man.
Absolute pleasure.
Cool. Okay. So now we're going to move away from where we were before, which was kind of how to conceptually design the menus, to how we're going to actually facilitate this. So as we said earlier, huge numbers of staff are on furlough. We can probably have one staff member working in a space that previously used to be occupied by even 3 or 4 people. We need to make sure that these drinks can be made in a completely safe and simple manner. So the question is kind of how can we streamline production of these things, so coffee, cocktails, and food, to ensure as few people come into the contact with the product as possible. But I think we should also refer back as well and reflect on workflow and how the situation behind the bar is going to look. So operationally, whether we're going to have social distancing behind the bar, how this can be maintained, whether that's different jobs for different people, or whether it's a station each. And I think perhaps Martin, you could talk through how you would, if you were running a bar or a coffee shop or a restaurant, where you would station the different people within that.
I can actually back this up by a few examples. I did have a recently very interesting meeting with one of our customers who came back to us, informed us of his new and well of his menu, which he will be running for the next few months, and it was reduced to literally 5 drinks. They decided to actually put people at certain stations behind the bar, to reduce any sort of cross contamination. And there is person which is literally attached to the coffee machine. However, the same person is responsible for delivering drinks from a production point to the customer. But there is another person technically behind the till who's responsible for handling food and dealing with till and payments, even though it's contactless. So that's how they have resolved this problem. But they have their menu is reduced. It's very, very simple. Henry's example was spot on. This is exactly what they're aiming for. I think that Cloudy Lemonade would be one of their sort of non-alcoholic, non-coffee based product, which is again very simple solution, still sparkling, natural ingredients, very easy to produce and easy to serve, and also a decent margin maker. Just to mention, it's quite important for every business now to generate as much revenue as they possibly can from every single drink.
Yeah. And Sam, at Grind, do you think I know Grind are very strong at having people who are very good at a lot of different things. Do you think in at least the short term, there'll be more of a focus on particular roles for particular people, even if it's not as rigid as to say, you're a barista, you just make coffee, but for this day, do you think it will be, Sam, you're on the machine today, your colleague will be on till? Do you think it'll be very defined like that?
Yeah, what we've done in Greenwich, which we're lucky that it has its own dedicated grab and go coffee space that's really purpose built for just running a grab and go service. So we're quite fortunate in that aspect. But it's still not very big. So we very much had to stretch everything out to each end of the bar. You have one person on the coffee machine dealing with all the coffee aspect and dealing with handing the drink to the consumer. And then you have the other person at the other end of the bar, putting things to the POS system, taking the orders, processing the payments, to maintain a level of distancing. Mm-hmm. And reducing transmission behind the bar. I think that it's a little bit less about sort of skill set roles and a little bit more about physical deployment.
Yeah.
It's like, this is your space and that's where you're going to be. Because obviously if we have people just moving around, crossing over each other, social distancing is always going to be challenging in a behind the bar, back of house situation. So we have to do as much as we can to really put systems in place to cut transmission risks. We're looking at a few different things for some of our other sites, with regards to prep, with regards to reducing contact points, that sort of thing. I think something that we're going to see a lot of, particularly in the cocktail industry, is pre-batch serves.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Because
it's a very easy way for one person to come in, prepare a bunch of drinks in a very stable, low transmission environment, using non-homemade ingredients that are stable and have shelf life. And therefore, when your guests come in, you're literally just serving them something in a very clean, very slick way out of a fridge, which is different to what people have as their conception of a cocktail bar. But I think something that we've seen that at-home bottled cocktail market explode, and I expect we'll see that transition into venues as we move to reopening.
Yeah, I think in the short to medium term, there's going to be limitations on how long people can stay in a venue anyway. So actually, you probably don't want to spend time with your back to a bartender who's crafting the most amazing drink if you can't see that and you're not getting that experience. You're going to be at least distanced from them, but realistically, you might even be in a separate booth where you can't even see the bar. I think walking up to a bar, that's probably not going to be how we know it to be for a very long time. There's always going to be the barriers, the screens. So I think, like you say, if we can pre-batch and have things ready to go, quick serve, order, whether it's done through an app or whatever this kind of order system might be, but speed of service is going to be key because people want to get probably as many drinks in there as they can in the short time they're able to sit there. So
menus are another good point that you raised. The whole idea of you have venues that have specialist printed menus, or you have guys that print them off at the beginning of each shift. That's not going to be able to happen anymore. So whether we have menus that are fixed to the tables and laminated and then disinfected after every sitting, you have some sort of digital menu. I saw that Noma, for their offering, they've got a little QR code that you scan on the table that takes you to a website link with an easily updated thing. Yeah. Things like that, I think, are going to be key in still crafting and creating the experience for the guest, whilst ensuring they feel safe and that the staff feel safe as well, which is equally important.
Yeah. Do you have like a digital order system, or is it still paper?
No, so we have a contactless payment app for coffee.
Right.
Obviously, in the limited amount of time that we were open pre-lockdown, we went totally cashless. Mm-hmm. And we're currently working to evolve the app that we built as a sort of grab and go, order a coffee and collect it at the door, to be able to be used with sort of larger items, different things, different parts of the business. Which I think is, again, something we're going to see a lot more. It's going to become a lot more normalized.
Yeah.
Sort of think the Weatherspoons app, in where you can just order something to a table. I think we're going to see a lot more like that. Yeah,
for sure. And a big question, which I think is actually probably more important for bartenders than it is customers, is this the end of the glass? Do you think, Henry, do you think glasses are still feasible? Do you think it's the end permanently? Do you think it's short term? What do we do?
I think maybe in the short term, they might be eradicated, but I mean, takeaway options, they're great, but I mean, for me, they might affect the flavor of the overall beverage. Yeah. Potentially, you've got the likes of, if you take a porn-style martini with Prosecco, it doesn't quite taste the same out of a paper cup. But I think people they will adapt themselves as consumers, and they will just make do. And to be honest, I'm not going to complain about this, because I'm actually out with friends drinking a drink of high level instead of sat at home on my own, wondering when I'm going to run again. I think glasses will come back in, but only if consumers and staff will feel safe using them.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's really important. It's going to be down to the customers, isn't it? If people feel safe with it and reassured that it is, whether it's, whether your dishwasher goes so hot that it sterilizes the glass, or whether it's polished to within an inch of its life, I think we're going to have to be really cautious about how we do this. And then that's going to have a knock-on effect to the kind of workflow. I've been sterilizing bottles for my little son, and I know making a bottle is like 10 times longer than you expect it to be. So you have to steam it, sterilize it, dry it, whatever else. So all of these additional steps, there's a bit of a contrast. There's extra steps, but less people available. So I think we're going to really have to simplify what we're doing, whether that's kind of your kind of readily available ingredients rather than excruciatingly made from scratch ingredients. These are all things we need to factor in, again, going back to the menus and the things we have on the menu. So when we're taking orders, I think historically people would order their core drink, whether that's a latte, a flat white, iced coffee, whatever, and then they would have the option to add sundries, so sugar, whatever else out the front, a straw, a lid for their takeaway cup. How can we internalize this process, bring it behind the bar, and ensure not only do we give great service whilst doing this, but minimizing as few hands as possible? Do you think there's a place for bottled syrups? Obviously, MONIN is a good example of that. Do we think this is the end of crystallized sugar? Martin, do you think things will ever move back to the customer, or do you think it will stay behind the bar from now
on? Definitely stay behind the bar, and we have a solutions for it. Whether this is cane sugar, whether this is honeycomb sugar. I actually have been asked yesterday whether I would like to have my sugar with my flat white. So my iced drink was caramel colored brew, and the other one was my beloved flat white. The first question the lady has asked behind the counter was whether I would like to ask sugar. Somehow I did not ask for sugar, but I believe that they would offer me a liquid solution, which would be much quicker, much faster in execution. It will dissolve in the drink way faster. It will be consistent in dosing as well. So that would be definitely the option to go quick and easy.
I think this is something that, obviously this is focused around product, but if we're going to be ordering a drink, to be able to have an expert finish our drink is better than people throwing in loads of, crystallized sugar that'll actually end up sitting on the bottom of the drink, not dissolving. This is actually probably a good step forward. I think, Henry, you've got a couple of ideas on, rather than obviously brown and white sugar, a couple of different options from MONIN that might be good alternatives that we can keep behind the bar that are kind of more natural. And then obviously we've got the flavored options as well.
Yeah, so some of the more natural flavors we currently have in the range, obviously, Martin touched on. We've got cane sugar, we've got honey syrup, and we've got an agave syrup as well. So obviously you've got that alternative if people don't like sugar on its own. We've also got some sugar-free options that were really popular pre-COVID. So obviously we've got a sugar-free gum. We have a sugar-free vanilla, caramel, salted caramel, and hazelnut. So I think we've got pretty much nearly every eventuality covered. And also with the bottles, we also have pumps as well. So that will minimize any potential harmful germs or bacteria. Just simply one pump by the barista. And as you say, it's not granulated, so it's instantly going to dissolve into a beverage. So easy to use as well, which will increase speed of service.
I genuinely think it's going to be it will improve the quality of drinks served, because actually it will encourage conversation. So if someone says, I want 5 sugars, it gives you the opportunity to say, actually, if you have 5 sugars, that's going to be far too sweet. It's already a sweet, balanced drink. Do you think the expertise of the barista and bartender will allow for better conversations moving forward, rather than just having people walk over to a little dingy station of, dirty sugars and tissues and whatnot? Do you think that's probably a step forward?
I hope it will be.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. I mean, but I think at the end of the day, people are always free to do what they want to do. Especially after people are young. I think some may resort back to, or go back to how they were. But I think some might look at it almost through new eyes, but we shall see.
Yeah. Is that what you're doing at Grind, Sam? Having the baristas or the server ask whether they want any mods to the drinks at the till point?
Yes. So previously we didn't have caddies like the one you showed us, but we did have a little sort of takeaway section. Our rationale was always that by allowing the customer to particularly lid their own drink, it helped improve the flow of the store and stop the choke point at the barista. Mm-hmm. However, obviously in a post-COVID world, all of that has come behind the counter. Yeah. We lid the drinks, we add the sugar. I believe we're using liquid syrups.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on that though. But we are asking the guest how many sugars they would like, and then applying them ourselves. And you're right, it does open up a point of conversation. Yeah. I have memories of working on the high street in chains of people are literally asking for 5 or 7 sugars. Yeah. And so hopefully being able to give them the same experience for less sugar, because if that's just sugar, it's just not going to dissolve in a coffee at 50 degrees, is it really?
I think we can perhaps take a leaf out of good restaurants' books. They pre-season the food how they think it's best. If you want more, no worries at all. But actually, if we're going to make an vanilla latte, whatever, if we want 15 ml of syrup, that's what we think is best. But if you want more, obviously no problem at all. But I do think it opens an interesting conversation where if you're a barista, a bartender, a sommelier, a chef, whatever it might be, you want people to trust you and trust your skill set to create a balanced drink that they'll enjoy. So I think it's just another way we can improve the quality of drinks that we serve and the customer service we give.
No, so I agree.
Could be a good step
forward.
So is it feasible to have space markers on the floor behind the bar, do we think?
Yes.
Yeah. In most instances.
I think it's feasible and indeed necessary. I think the reality is in a lot of venues, particularly in central London, where we're space poor, you're not going to be able to adhere to a 2-meter rule or whatever the distance is. Yeah. But having those markers and doing everything you can, and then taking additional steps to limit transmission, whether it be gloves, face masks, I think it's 100% necessary. Again, I think there's a lot of focus on the safety of the guest, which is important, but we also need to think about the safety of our team.
For sure. And we need to perhaps rethink how we position our stations. So with every coffee machine as an accompanying grinder, can we somehow separate those steps so that the grinder's 1 or 2 meters away, shots brewing, someone else stops that. And then it's, these are all things we need to think about. And each cafe, restaurant, bar is different, but I think these are the things we need to work out as an industry, how we can make these things as safe as possible. So obviously we've spoken about simplicity, but I do think as we start to move out of the kind of post-COVID phase, there will be a lot of room for innovation and kind of new things. So as things come back to life, how do you see this coming much? And do you think there's going to be a big step forward in innovation? And how can we facilitate this?
Well, as we all know, MONIN is a leader in innovations, and we are actually working on a very interesting solution for a the customers who, with a sweet tooth. So if the drink will be pre-made and it will contain as much vanilla syrup as we think it's actually correct, because obviously all the drinks on the menu have got their own specific recipe. If they will request for a little bit more, they don't have to hand the drink back for us to add a little bit more vanilla sugar. We can just hand them a small sachet filled in with vanilla liquid. So this would be something, our new product, which we will hopefully launch very, very soon. Individual sachet with 50 milliliters of vanilla, let's say vanilla or caramel syrup inside. I think that this would be a good solution to have behind the bar.
Yeah, I guess that gives people more control over their own drink as well. I think it's quite cool when, I don't know if you've seen it, like a Bloody Mary trolley, where there's essentially a deconstructed Bloody Mary and you can kind of build your own. So if we can have a little bit of, obviously we've got the control behind the bar, but giving people that kind of flexibility and freedom to kind of hack their own drinks, I guess that's going to be something interesting in maybe phase 2, once we've kind of
and also
the initial opening out of the way.
You have mentioned that homemade cocktail, not homemade cocktails which were created to be built at home. Was a big thing over the last couple of months, but I have noticed exactly the same trend in coffee. One of our customers is looking to launch very, very soon coffee kit with their own coffee in the kit, with some kind of a brewer, whether this is a cafeteria or V60, and with either 5 milliliters, sort of 50 milliliters single glass syrup, or actually with a sachet. And this will be delivered, this will be branded solution, and this will be delivered to customers' home, either purchased through their website or actually purchased directly from their shops.
Nice. That's a really good point, actually. We're going to, obviously, people will come to us as restaurants and bars, but we need to go to them. I think if we can come up with really good solutions for delivering, whether it's a batch of filter coffee or, a mass solution, a keg of cocktail, whatever that might be, I think one person preparing 50 drinks is a much cleaner, safer way than 50 people creating 50 drinks. So actually, if you can pre-batch and bring, whether that's through people like Deliveroo or Just Eat, whatever, then that's probably a really good step forward for the industry as well. I think, that's a very valid point and one we can take on board for sure. So I think that kind of wraps up our talk around operations and product offering in the post-COVID world. Thank you guys for being involved. It's been an absolute pleasure to speak to you all and get your insights on the topic. I think to take away, there's a few key factors we need to consider when we're designing a menu. So simplicity, popular drinks that are going to be good margins, easy to prepare, won't take too many people to kind of be involved with making. Nostalgia is something really, really important, and keeping things refined so that we're making sure we're not wasting anything, and that the drinks we're making are valuable and really well received by our customers. And then when we move behind the bar, we've obviously got to make these in a responsible way, got to make them in a safe way. And the key thing for customers is making sure they're reassured, they feel safe, they feel comfortable in our premises. So I think we're going to take big steps in achieving this, and hopefully we can help in some way with this. So of course, feel free to reach out to any of us after this. Feel free to mention questions in the comments, and thank you for joining us. Thanks to you guys for being involved and giving your valuable thoughts. And join us next week. We're going to be talking about communications and customer service. So obviously today we spoke about everything behind the bar, behind the Perspex screen probably. But next week we're going to talk about the front of house. So what's going to happen with customers? How can we manage customer flow, customer journey, and how can we develop our businesses, make them more robust, and talk about technology and giving customer service beyond face-to-face. So using technology, using social media platforms, and a few other points of conversation as well. So we'll see you next Friday. Thanks very much to Marcin, to Henry, and to Sam. And I hope you all stay safe, and we'll see you again soon. On behalf of everyone, thank you very much.